Israel said on Monday that 11 more hostages had been released in the Gaza Strip and had arrived safely. The move came hours after the announcement that a truce between Israel and Hamas will be extended by 2 more days, opening the way for further releases. Shortly after the arrival of the hostages was confirmed, Israel's prison authorities said 33 Palestinian inmates had been released. The freed Israelis are dual nationals of France, Germany and Argentina, according to Qatar, which helped mediate the deal. Most Gaza residents have been displaced and the whole territory is short on essentials such as food, water and medical supplies. However, the chief of the United Nations has hailed the developments that have come forth.
It's a glimpse of hope and humanity in the middle of the darkness of war. And I strongly hope that this will enable us to increase even more the humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza that is suffering so much, knowing that even with that additional amount of time, it will be impossible to satisfy all the dramatic needs of the population in Gaza.
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock welcomed the release of the hostages, including 2 teenagers. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will pay his 3rd wartime visit to West Asia this week. A senior said that the U.S. top diplomat would meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Tel Aviv and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. Qatar, with the support of the United States and Egypt, has been engaged in intense negotiations to establish and prolong the truce in Gaza. Hamas, which runs Gaza and triggered the war with its attacks last month, said that it was drawing up a new list of hostages for release. The White House has welcomed the agreement to extend the truce, and here's what the U.S. National Security Council spokesperson had to say.
This humanitarian pause has already brought a halt to the fighting, together with a surge of humanitarian assistance. We would, of course, hope to see the pause extended further, and that will depend upon Hamas continuing to release hostages.
Now, for more on this, our correspondent Jody Cohen joins us from Eilov Medical Center, Tel Aviv. Jody, thank you so much for joining us. What can you tell us about the latest on hostages who've been released and their condition?
Hi, so on Monday we saw 9 children and 2 mothers released. They're at this medical centre in Tel Aviv. All of them have one thing in common, and they all have family who are still being held captive in Gaza. Now, so far 50 hostages have been released. We've heard from the doctors here that most of the hostages released yesterday are in a stable physical condition. In fact, most of the 50 hostages physically seem to be stable. We've heard of a lady called Alma who was returned unconscious and wounded and is fighting for her life. And there's a young teenager who was shot who's also having a series of operations. But psychologically, they've been through a horrendous trauma, and we're hearing from the hospital that they're encouraging the children to invite their friends to come and visit, because it's easier for children to open up to children than to an adult psychologist who is a stranger. We've also heard over the past couple of days that some mothers have been separated from their children, with the children being released and the mothers still being held captive, and that's in violation of the agreement. For example, a girl called Hila, who's 12 years old, was with her mother, Rhea. Hila was released, Rhea was not, and Hamas says that they don't know where Rhea is, and Hila says that she was with her mother just 2 days before her release. In terms of the conditions they've been kept in, we've heard that they've been kept in dark tunnels, didn't know the difference between night and day, were fed rice and pita bread over the last couple of weeks, slept on the floor or on plastic chairs. But I also spoke to a grandmother of some hostages who've been released yesterday, who said that they can't say too much because they're concerned for their relatives who are still being held captive. Now, in terms of the Palestinian prisoners, 150 have been released over the past couple of days. These are women and teenagers from the age of 14 to 18 who've been involved in terror activities. So, for example, Isra Jabis was released yesterday. She's an iconic figure. She attempted a suicide bomb attack and her face was disfigured in that failed attempt. And also today, Ahad Tamimi is reportedly going to be released. She was arrested 3 weeks ago. She called for Palestinians to to slaughter Israelis and say they will drink Israelis' blood and eat their skulls. So very much mixed emotions. Definitely absolute joy on the hostages who've been released here, but also mixed emotions in terms of the Palestinian prisoners who have been released early as well.
Right. I can only imagine, Jody. Now, also when we talk about terms of agreement, what do we know about the terms of the truce extension?
So we don't know too much. We've heard that there's going to be a 2-day extension. There were negotiations. At one point we heard potentially a 4-day extension. We've also heard that the Israeli authorities have received the list of the hostages who are due to be released later on today, and that Hamas has received the list of the Palestinian prisoners who are going to be released early. Qatar made this announcement. As you said, leaders around the world have been welcoming the announcement of this extension. There's speculation about whether more women and children will be included in today's release list, and also potentially some elderly men. Hamas has said that they won't release younger men, even though most of them are civilian. The other thing that today, the hostages who have been released last night, and they're in this hospital where I'm standing now, the other thing they've got in common is they're all from a kibbutz called Nir Oz, and 49 members of their small community, their kibbutz, are still being held captive. More than a quarter of the entire community were either abducted or murdered on the 7th of October by Hamas, so they'll be waiting with bated breath to hear if more of their community members are going to be released today.
All right, well, Jody, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on this. We will, of course, continue to track all the developments with you there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.